Hello, welcome to a new episode of First Impressions, and we're going to talk about the new Gorillaz album, which is 6 months old. I put it off for whatever reason. I'll go a little bit more into that later on, but I sort of want to tell the story of like what I think of Gorillaz as a whole. First off, I really like Blur. I've liked Blur longer than I've liked Gorillaz, and Blur, to me, are one of the best bands of the whole 90s. And while Damon Albarn isn't an amazing singer, he's got a nice personality, and he's a good songwriter. I really like him as a songwriter. And Gorillaz, or to me, they're definitely one of the best things to have happened in the 2000s. They're the two Gorillaz albums from the 2000s, and their side projects, I guess, that's the two sort of like side releases that came out with them, are some of the best stuff to have been leaking into the mainstream in that time, because some really, especially that first album, that's some really experimental stuff to have been very popular in 2001, which was not a good time for music. I mean, people are getting, like, people like me, people who grew up in the 2000s, for whom that was the era of their childhood, and that's where their memories are. We are getting old enough that we are starting to sort of look at the 2000s with rose-colored glasses. You're seeing that, you're starting to see that with music. Unfortunately, you're starting to see that with politics a little bit. But I still stand by that I think the music of the 2000s was not good. The rock music of the 2000s, certainly the American rock music of the 2000s, was not good. The nu metal was awful. Post-grunge is probably my least favorite genre ever. And indie is all right, but like that's when rock started to get so repetitive. You know, the metal of the 2000s is all right. Probably the worst decade of hip-hop that I'm aware of. I am not necessarily a connoisseur of hip-hop. I don't know the history. I mean, I know there was good stuff that came out in the 2000s in that genre. I like MF Doom. I like Kanye's 2000s albums, with the exception of Graduation, and to a lesser extent 808s and Heartbreak, both of which I think are good but uneven. But his first two are great. And of course, those two Gorillaz albums have some great hip-hop on them for albums produced by a man who was known for making some of the whitest music you could ever possibly imagine in your life, which always amused me about Gorillaz. But no, in the 2000s, Gorillaz were great. But then the 2010s came around and things changed. I've had to sort of go back and find out about a lot of the 2010s music, because I was never big into the radio, but I completely lost track of what was popular somewhere around 2011. You know, it was I'll put it to you like this. The last year I paid any attention to what was on the radio was when LMFAO were popular and when Fun were coming around, and I hated both of those bands. And I still don't like either of them. So I've had to reconstruct all of that. But from my perspective, at least, the 2010s have been a lot better. Not for rock, but for hip-hop, certainly. For pop, to an extent. And we have some really cool, like, kind of retro R&B stuff floating around now that I really like. So that's been good. But Gorillaz in the 2010s is a little bit more mixed of a story, because, you know, they took a break in between Demon Days and Plastic Beach, and then when they did Plastic Beach, it was... I feel about Plastic Beach the way I think everybody feels about Plastic Beach, or at least all the critics do, which is to say that I find it disappointing after Demon Days, but that's to be expected. Every band has that problem. You know, when you follow up the masterpiece, no matter how good you make it, it will almost always be a disappointment unless you come out with another masterpiece, which bands do sometimes. But no, I found it a little disappointing. And then there was, I think, some drama. I've heard very conflicting stories about this over the years. Plastic Beach was super ambitious. And I've always heard over the years that there was supposed to be a whole nother album, or at least an album of side projects and stuff that didn't make it into the actual Plastic Beach. But the story I've always heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, is that they blew basically all of their money on the music videos and the sort of the background stuff, the sort of the alternate reality stuff, the stuff related to the sort of cartoon characters that are supposedly in the band. And so they actually didn't have any money to finish up a lot of their stuff, and the album didn't sell as well as it might have, because I think that was just when, that was like at the cusp of the time when when it started being a thing that nobody buys albums anymore, everybody pirates them. Whatever the case, Plastic Beach wound up being kind of a lackluster project. I like it, but I do have reservations about it. And supposedly Damon Albarn and Jamie Hewlett, who's the artist, if you don't know, had a falling out after Plastic Beach happened. They did The Fall the night Albarn did The Fall by himself the next year, and they released one song a year after that, and that was it. And then that was all we heard of Gorillaz for a while, until they announced, I think sometime in 2015 or 2016, that their album was going to come out in 2016. 2016 rolled around, was a really, really bad year for a lot of different reasons. For whatever reason, stuff didn't work out. They weren't able to finish the album. It got pushed back to this year. Beginning of this year rolls around. They release the song Hallelujah Money on the day that Trump gets sworn in as president. And I listened to that song and I was unsure of what to think about it. I liked the song then, but I was a little thrown off by that being the first song that they would release. And that's kind of my reaction to Humanz in a nutshell when I first got it. Is it threw me off. And the reason I didn't review it when I first got it is that I think that when I first got it, I probably would have given it a bad review. If I had done what a lot of people did, album comes out, listen to it once, put the review, shoot the video, put the review on the internet, I think I would have given it a negative review, because this album had to grow on me. The first time I listened to it, I got really bored about halfway through and didn't finish the album for another day. And granted, some of that was due to the fact that at the time I bought this album, I was buying all the P-Funk albums and all the Miles Davis, and I was listening to a lot of the Miles Davis I didn't have, so I was into different music at the time, and I wasn't necessarily feeling a Gorillaz album the way I was, say, November of last year. So I put the album down for a long time. I periodically revisited it. I think I listened to it in full once in the summer, and then once about 3 weeks ago when I almost did this video, but I ultimately opted not to do that. In any case, I just listened to it again today, and I like it a lot more than I did. There are still things about it that I don't like. The interludes are annoying to me. I don't like the way that Damon Albarn is way in the background. Like, he only takes the center stage on one or two of these songs. But that's not just the case from a vocal perspective. There are a lot of these songs where I would not have ever suspected that Damon Albarn or Gorillaz were involved in the production of these songs if if I didn't know that they were involved in the production of these songs. If I heard, say, if I heard Ascension, or if I heard, well, I mean, really, the first three songs are great examples of that. If I heard any of those songs on the radio and didn't know who they were by, I would not say Gorillaz. And that's not to bash any of those songs. Ascension is I think it's Ascension, Strobe Light, Hallelujah Money, and Charger. But that's not really a critique of the album, because a lot of those songs that I just mentioned that don't really sound like Gorillaz to me are some of my favorite songs on this album. This album starts off really, really strong. Because Ascension is just Vince Staples hitting it out of the park on that rap bit in there. And it just builds and builds and builds. And then Strobe Light is just fantastic retro funk, soul, whatever you want to call that. Really, really good. And then Saturn's Bars can get annoying, and I kind of have to be in the mood for it. But I think that song's good as well. Moments is fantastic and features, I think, the only returning face on this album. You know, I think. I don't recognize any of these other people, but, you know, I don't remember a lot of the songs on Plastic Beach a lot of the time, and this album kind of suffers from that as well, which I'll go into a little bit. But I think De La Soul is the only returning, like, known faces of the features on this album. I think other than them, I think it's pretty much all people who have not collaborated with Gorillaz before. The Charger, the song with Grace Jones, is really, really good as well. All in all, I've got to say, I think this is a good album, and I liked this a lot. This album, I think, got a bit of a mixed reception. Maybe not from official review sources like magazines and internet publications, but from internet reviewers that I've watched videos from, and from the friends who I've talked to. I would say this album got mixed reviews because, or a bit of a mixed reception, I should say, because a lot of the friends who I asked about this album hated it. I know my one friend said that the Vince Staples song was the only song that they liked on the album, and he didn't like anything else. And then the other friend only liked the Grace Jones song, and so I was like, wow, I mean, at the time I didn't like the album that much, but I was like, I like it more than that. At the end of the day, this album suffers from some of the same problems that kind of dragged Plastic Beach down, but it also has kind of unique problems of its own. First of all, Plastic Beach had way too many features on it. Like, I'm trying to think. There were like maybe one or two songs on Plastic Beach that didn't have features on them. And I mean, that's kind of true of Demon Days as well, but all of the features on Demon Days were really, really good, and a lot of the Plastic Beach features were not. Like Plastic Beach had some really good features on a few tracks. Like the style of the song with Bobby Womack was fantastic. The song with Lou Reed was really, really good. The songs that they did with the lead singer to Little Dragon, I really, really liked, and I do kind of wish they'd gotten her back for this album, because those were two of my favorite songs on Plastic Beach, Empire Ants in particular. But But no, the Plastic Beach had some very hit or miss features on it. Looking at it here, it actually seems like there maybe weren't that many features on it, but it's just like some of them were uneven. I don't know. The thing about Plastic Beach, for me, is that Plastic Beach has a lot of like upbeat, kind of up-tempo, really poppy songs that kind of aren't that good or are just forgettable. But then it has some like fantastic kind of like bleak, cold electronic pop music on it. And it's interesting, it's weird to have a Gorillaz album where the songs that don't really have hip hop on them are the best songs on the album. But that's really kind of how Plastic Beach is. It's which is interesting because like I said, Demon Days has a lot of hip hop on there. Pretty much every other song on Demon Days has rapping of some kind on it. And while there are really poppy songs on there, I mean, like Dare, there's only really one of those, and all the other stuff, it's either hip hoppy stuff or experimental stuff or whatever you want to call that like suite of 3 songs that closes out the album is. But no, which, first of all, let me get to my big complaint about this album, and I think it's everybody's big complaint about this album, and that is that this is Gorillaz at the most faceless that they have ever been. Because not only do they not sound like their first couple albums, because, like, on the one hand, their first 2 albums don't really sound alike, but on the other hand, they do kind of have a coherent stylistic thing happening there. Gorillaz on here mostly just sound like other bands, with a few exceptions. As I said, a lot of this stuff could be by any band that's around now. There's nothing on here aside from the songs that Damon Albarn is flat out singing on, which is another issue I'll get to. Really, really sounds like Gorillaz. It sounds like, the song with... it sounds like the people that they're featuring are the people who made these songs, and that's kind of a weakness for me. I mean, it's not necessarily because they're good songs, but on the other hand, also it sounds like they don't really have an identity anymore. And I'll be curious to hear what the extra tracks on the whatever this super deluxe edition thing that they've put out, which you will probably get a video on that as well in the coming weeks, sounds like. But this album kind of fails to establish too much of an identity of its own, and it definitely could have benefited from more Damon Albarn, and it definitely could have benefited from more hooks. Because that's a thing with this album. This album doesn't have a huge number of pop hooks relative to their earlier stuff. This is very much... This is not experimental, I would say. Like it's not experimental in a world where death grips are mainstream. But it is farther out there than either Plastic Beach or Demon Days were. And honestly, that's my complaint here, is that I wanted more. If they're going to do it like this, if they're going to do it like Plastic Beach, because this album at the end of the day is a lot like Plastic Beach, I would like more pop songs. I would like more of those really good pop songs that we got on Plastic Beach. stuff like Broken, Empire Ants. There was one of the outtake songs from Plastic Beach too. I get the sense with Plastic Beach that they had a lot of really good stuff from those sessions that is just never going to see the light of day. But no. I also have the original deluxe edition, which was slightly more expensive, and that's also why I am not buying this super deluxe edition, whatever that is. I paid extra for that once, Damon. I'm not going to pay for it again. And the songs on the deluxe edition are almost a little better than some of these songs that are on the proper album, to the point where you wonder why these songs weren't on the proper album. It's like when you get like The Apprentice, Halfway to the Halfway House, Out of Body, really, really good songs, and you wonder, like, why didn't you switch these out for some of the more iffy songs on this album? And the other thing is the interludes are a bit annoying to me. I'm not really sure why they exist. A part of me wonders if they finished this album and then tacked on the interludes, because we do know they recorded this album, and Albarn said, I want you all to sing and rap and do whatever your thing is as if Trump was going to win. And, of course, as we all know, Trump wound up winning. So, a part of me does wonder if these were an afterthought. I kind of suspect they weren't, but they kind of detract from the album. The other thing is that this album feels very, very long. And that is part of the reason I took me so long. And that's part of the reason it took me so long to review this, is that this album feels much longer than it actually is. I looked at it, and the original album's track listing, it's actually a minute or two shorter than Demon Days, which is an album that feels really short when you listen to Demon Days. So when you turn on Demon Days and you turn on the intro, and before you know it, you're at Fire Coming Out of a Monkey's Head or Don't Get Lost in Heaven. That album goes fast, but this one gives me that feeling where about halfway through I'm like, I want to turn this off and go listen to something else. I want to listen to the new Primus album, or I want to go listen to the new Kendrick album. And it's like, on the one hand, I like the album. On the other hand, it is flawed, and I don't know. The Gorillaz have been a band that I have enjoyed a lot. I'm going to continue to look forward to whatever stuff they put out, and try to get some of the stuff that I don't have. I still don't have The Fall. I still don't have either G-sides or D-sides. And yeah, so I'll be interested to see what they produce in the future. You could probably expect a review of that, whatever this super deluxe thing is they're putting out, some point in the next week or two. And that was a really weird hand movement I made just then. So on that note, see you guys later.